Compared to last year, Florida State's offensive scoring output will double.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It is time to put in writing some of the predictions that I have for the 2025 Florida State Seminoles. And the most important one is on the offensive side of the ball. So the overview of this podcast is about the quarterback play, the scoring average, how it's going to get done, which players I expect to ascend, and most importantly, will it matter in terms of the win column? We're going to discuss all of that throughout the show, mix in a little bit of information based on the media day. There was some really good info on both sides of the ball that helped me come up with these predictions. So let's get started right now. First off, here are the numbers last year, as putrid as they were for Florida State offensively. You got to talk about them. Got to put them up there to say, okay, well, here they are. How do you double? What are you doubling? Points per game, Florida State was 15.4. Obviously, just pathetic. But I think that actually they're going to be more than double that based on my prediction. Rushing average per carry, only 2.85. That's unfathomable. Rushing yards per game, 89.9. Passing yards per game, 180.3. And total offense, 270.3. So looking at those numbers, I'm just going to give my prediction now. Then we get done with the offensive prediction stuff. I'm going to talk about it again to kind of solidify why I have these numbers. Number one, scoring points per game. I'm going 31 points per game for the Noles. I think that it's pretty easy to get to 25 to 26 points per game with Florida State's talent. When you mix in the expertise that Gus has with this kind of offense, managing not just the red zone or like big play calls, etc., but how to handle players in today's era. Like he's done a little bit of everything at multiple stops. He's been at Tulsa, he's been at Arkansas, he's been at Arkansas State, he's been at Auburn, he's been at UCF, now Florida State. He has been around. And of course, he was a high school coach. I think that circumstances will come up that his expertise and experience will really help. So if they're struggling a little bit, he'll find something. And Castellanos has a lot of trust in Gus Malzahn. So that's a big factor. And I just think that people in general are overlooking Florida State's skill talent. Landon Thomas is an NFL player. I think multiple guys at running back, Rodell in particular, the most likely right away, will make it to the NFL. Deuce Robinson is an NFL player. They're going to make explosive plays. And then Thomas, I don't know if he'll play in the NFL as a quarterback in any capacity, but for the collegiate game, he's a playmaker. So even when things aren't blocked properly or the defense just makes a good play, Florida State has guys among, I don't even know how far I want to go. Jalen Lucas, I'll talk about him a little bit. They're going to have playmakers that hit big plays. Here's another little prediction just kind of on the fly. Plays of over 40 yards in college football this year, Florida State will conservatively be in the top 20 of the country. They have too much speed not to. Plus, you got Deuce, who's 220 pounds, and Landon Thomas, he's a tight end, but he plays more like a big wide receiver. Those kinds of players are going to catch 50-50 balls. Then you have all those running backs like Mekhi Danzy has left that running back room to go play receiver. They have so many running backs, they moved him. Keziah, Rodell, Cam, Osmond. Like they have so many different guys at running back. It's insane. They're going to score some points. Now, as far as the other averages, I think they'll average about 5.2 yards per carry. It'll certainly be over 5. I've got them for 205 yards rushing per game. It would be higher, but based on the teams they're playing, I think they're going to throw the ball a little bit more because they play Bama in their out-of-conference schedule. If they played in another directional school, that number would be like 220, 225. It's going to be a lot harder to run the ball against Bama than somebody like, no offense, Georgia Southern or something like that. That's why I only have them for 205. 225 yards passing per game, 430 overall. And to put it in perspective, scoring, that would be like 43rd in the country at 31. Rushing average 19th for per carry and 16th for the per game. Passing 71st. This is going to be a run-first offense. So I'm not really worried about the passing offense. And then total offense, it would be 26th. based on last year's numbers. Like putting these numbers against last year, that's where they would be. So let me break down again why I think Florida State will more than double, actually, their scoring average. Thomas Castellanos fits Gus Malzahn's offense. They trust one another. If your offensive coordinator and quarterback are not on the same page, and I don't care if you're running the air raid, the West Coast offense from the 1980s, or any other offense, if your QB and your head coach slash coordinator, depends on the school, in this case, your offensive coordinator, do not get along or they don't have trust in each other, even just a little bit, your chances of ultimate success are pretty close to null and void. I'm not worried about that at all. So that's the biggest thing. Secondarily, what was your biggest problem last year? How much did you improve? Well, quarterback was a problem that's already taken out. So let's just talk about the other one, offensive line. You bring in 4 guys that have multiple years as starters at their prior school. Multiple years, not just, oh, he started 5 games. Oh, he's talented. We think he can. Multiple years as starters. They may not be consistent. And I've talked about this a number of times here on Locked On Seminoles. It's hard to mesh that many new guys. 100% agree with anybody that says, I don't know if that's going to work. There's some possible concern. There will be a game or two where they don't play as well because they haven't played together. But I'll still take 5 seniors that have started across the board at different places. Even Richie Leonard, who's a holdover transfer, came from Florida to Florida State. He still has starting experience. Florida State has one of the more unique offensive line situations in the country, but there's a good reason to think they're going to score a bunch of points. Now, if you want to get into the wide receiver room and you want to nitpick, by all means. They have a plethora of guys, and I'm going to talk about Tim Harris a little bit and his press conference and why I'm, to be honest, compared to what it was, I just watched his press conference right before I did this podcast. I'm probably more bullish on the wide receivers now than at any point since the 2023 season. Tim is a guy I know. He's a straight shooter. He does not mince words. He made it clear that they've got a lot of guys that can play, and he explained why. He's a very good communicator, and it's one of the reasons he's the best recruiters on Florida State staff. But I'm a little bit more bullish. Obviously, Deuce and Squirrel are going to play. That's not in question. Mekhi Danzy, he's high on him. Elite speed. He's one of the fastest players in college football, moving from running back over to wide receiver. Still has a long way to go, and Tim didn't deny that. But when you have a guy like that, that's your 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th, or 9th option, something like that, and you can just play him in certain spots, he's still going to make an impact in some capacity. He may only have 10 catches this year, but if it's for 250 yards, it wouldn't shock me. He is literally one of the probably 10 or so fastest players in college football. His 400-meter time is he's ran sub 46 before. Like, he can fly. That kind of guy at the back end of your depth chart with all the other young guys they have. I'm just going to give you an example. Wayne McCoy, and I don't know how many times we've talked about Javen Boggs. Those are a couple of the guys that are going to push the pile, but a guy like Gavin Blackwell, does he keep them from taking over his spot? I don't know, but he still has the ability to play at least a little bit. And again, they've got a nice mix of size, speed, and experience. Hopefully, based on what Tim said, this group should be pretty dynamic. He's also very high on BJ being a speed guy in addition to Danzy. So I'm very bullish on the opportunities with those guys. And then the wild card, as I've said many times, especially when Deuce needs to come out of the lineup to get a breather, is Elijah Moore, because he's a big-bodied receiver from the D.C. area. He's about 6'4". You don't get many guys like him. It's important that he does hit. That's probably my biggest question, because you can't teach size. They've got a plethora of guys that can go deep, though, so I think that's going to be good. And then just finally, I think we have a more mature and team-oriented offense. And if you do that, you won't have as many mental errors that truly cost you. There are going to be some problems I'll talk a little bit about in the next segment. They're inevitable when you install a new scheme. But with this much talent, especially with the offensive line having a gazillion starts amongst them, there's no reason Florida State shouldn't double their offensive output from last year. I might be a little light in the scoring average prediction. It's debatable. When we come back, we're going to discuss some of the specifics on more of the players here on Locked On Seminoles. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor that you've been trying to get on the golf course anytime that you need something, and instead of chasing down the beverage cart, and you turn it into a quick energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with your buddies, it's a great opportunity to boost your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off of it aren't always the best, and you need a little extra boost, and that's where 5-Hour Energy comes into play. So whether you're just trying to make some crazy trick shots with your buddies, or you're taking on a serious game where you're laying down some money to bet with your buddies, a 5-Hour Energy shot can help. So golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. Of course, the grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse to go without chasing down somebody to get something else to drink. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off. This is only valid through September 30th and cannot be used with other offers. Whether you're meeting up with friends or turning 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you once again for becoming an everydayer. And if you haven't, please do. We got a lot of stuff to talk about before Florida State takes on the Alabama Crimson Tide on August 30th. Now back to some of my predictions on the scoring average and why. Here are a few players that I think will stand out. I just mentioned Elijah Moore. That's a receiver that I have a pretty high opinion of based on his high school film, some of the things we heard last year. And Gus Malzahn's offense will play downhill. It will run the football 55% of the time. That's a conservative estimate, probably closer to 60%. And when they throw play action, Elijah is one of those guys that can hit some 50-50 balls. You're probably saying, well, what about Deuce? That's in addition to him. If you have multiple big-bodied receivers, which Norvell really likes, it makes a difference. You can't be so predictable that you run, throw deep. Obviously, Norvell knows that. Obviously, Gus Malzahn knows that. You have to mix it up, not only with your play calling, but with who you throw the football to. Moore, I think, will be one of those guys. Now, the other one, and Tim Harris talked about this quite a bit in his press conference, who's going to be the other deep ball guy? Is it Lil Wayne? Is it BJ? Is it Mackay? I have no idea. But I do know this. Florida State's speed at wide receiver is what you would expect. They have track kids playing out wide. They've got some size again, but the track speed is there. So Squirrel White, he's a guy that's got some speed, but he's more shifty in the slot. And they also have Jalen Lucas, who Tim talked about quite a bit, saying that he's learned both running back and receiver. They're going to use him. I just think the bevy of options that they have at slot, at flanker, and boundary make them a really big problem, because you're not going to be able to know based on personnel what Florida State's going to run. A lot of teams more or less give it away. And again, as I noted in the first segment of this show, in my opinion, Landon Thomas, even though he's only going to be a sophomore, he started towards the end of last season for the Noles in the way he catches the football, the way he tracks it, the way he can sink his hips and change direction. That's a really athletic guy. That's a big-bodied player. He's 240 plus, I would assume now, and he's about 6'5". And then you got Pittman, who's the H-back wild card, along with Jalen Lucas, that can line up in different spots. Catch out of the backfield. If you put him at fullback, you can put him at H-back, and he can be a blocker, then be a check down. And he could run a seam route for you, too. He was effective at UCF with Gus there. So they have him. And then don't forget about Amari Williams, too. They have so many different athletic body types. It will not be easy to scheme against Florida State's offense. Here's the one concern that I have overall. Just want to reiterate this. I've talked about it several times, and it's just a work in progress for any team here. This is not like anybody's fault. New coordinator, essentially 5 new linemen. Depends on how you want to label it, but one of their transfers played a few games last year, so he's not new, but he's new to this system. And then you got 4 more transfers. There's going to be some moments where they bog down, probably in some really bad moments. Full disclosure, I get that. I think Florida State will be a little bit inconsistent. They'll have a quarter where they go score 14 points and have 150 yards. You're like, wow, they're on fire today. And then like the next quarter, they'll have 60 yards and 2 turnovers because of the lack of consistency from having enough reps. Gus talked about that in his press conference. It was good this summer for some of them to work together and kind of work out the kinks because they had so many guys banged up, offensive line, etc. That is my one concern, and there's no way you can make up for lost time. How congruent are they? Are they consistent? And above all else, those things usually lead to the word that makes every fan, coach, and person in a stadium nervous: turnovers. I don't know where they will be on the turnover chart, but even with a senior quarterback, I imagine there's going to be some learning curve, and they might give away a few games because of turnovers. Again, first year for pretty much the entire offensive line, new quarterback, new coordinator. You're probably not going to be one of the better teams in the country in turnovers. So the scoring is one thing, but they're probably going to need to score because I think they're going to give the ball away more than I would like. They'll probably be in the bottom half of the country on turnovers. That's just going by math, going by the history of college football. We'll see. But if they don't do that, then those numbers like 31 points per game that I'm predicting could be 35, 36. It could be a lot higher, and the win total will change as well. But they're going to be in games because of their explosiveness. Again, I mentioned the 40-plus yard plays. A guy like Jalen Lucas, not many people are going to cover him. A slip screen to him, a bubble to somebody like Mekhi Danzy, and then play action to guys like Deuce, to Landon, to BJ, whoever it is, speed and size. Florida State has the ability to score a bunch of points, and in bunches. Like, they have that physical ability. Here are a couple other things that Tim Harris brought up when talking about the receiver room. Just to put it in perspective, it's expected that Squirrel will start and Deuce will start. That's not that difficult. Squirrel, or I think he could play outside or play the slot, but probably slot. The third receiver, Tim just talked about, needs consistency, and it's going to be a competition. He doesn't know who it's going to be. There are a lot of guys, and don't forget about, I mean, it's possible Florida State has another transfer that starts, and that's Gavin Blackwell from North Carolina. The only guy that is returning, in my opinion, that's a pure starter, that would be Landon Thomas, and Richie played a little bit last year. So depending on how you want to label it, 9 out of the 10 starters are guys that really weren't key players last year. I mean, Florida State's got a really new offense. Again, there's going to be some inconsistencies, but it should be explosive. And if they can find a groove, especially early in the season, my number for 31 points per game shouldn't really be that difficult to overcome. One other point here. He mentioned Jalen Lucas playing multiple positions. I don't know if Florida State will have several receivers do that, but that's something to watch this fall. Like, do they move Deuce around? Do they move Squirrel around? And do they do it consistently? Or is it just like for the big game against Miami on a third down or something like that? That's a debatable topic. We'll see. When we come back, I want to talk about the running back room, what David Johnson said, and kind of overall the thoughts on the offense to wrap it up. That is next here on Locked On Seminoles. Florida State's running back room is one of the deeper rooms in college football. The question is, who is the number one, if there is one? Further, if you wanted to go into it, who's the leader of that group, regardless of that individual's position on the depth chart? Those are the two things that I would like to find out before the end of fall camp. Coach Johnson was very poignant during his interview, and I thought it was pretty good that he mentioned they had so many different skill sets. I've talked about that several times here on Locked On Seminoles, but it's good to hear the guy that's actually getting paid a whole bunch of money make that statement. He talked about Jalen. He talked about Rodell. He talked about having the ability, like with a guy like Keziah, all the experience they have. Then they got some younger players like Usman Kroma coming in, and he said, this is a great quote because I knew this from seeing him at Future 50 a couple of years ago. Soft hands, got really big hands. That's true from shaking his hand. He's a big kid, and he tracks the deep ball. I don't know if I've ever heard a running back coach describe a freshman and talk about catching the deep ball, and he's a running back. I don't think I ever have. Like, Kroma could go play wide receiver. So Florida State's wide receiver room's good, but their running backs can help in the pass game a lot too, which is ironic because that's one of the reasons I always kind of followed Florida State when I was younger. I loved how they used the running backs in the passing game, Wart Dunn in particular, but they've done it forever, and it's a really big pain because most linebackers can't really hang with running backs in space. So if you got guys that can track the football, especially over their shoulder, catching the ball away from their body, man, you can really, really pick on teams in today's game. And I think Thomas Castellanos, with his ability to extend plays, that'll certainly help. He also mentioned something that, knock on wood, that is very important and certainly was not true last year. He said right now, Florida State, they're healthy at running back. I know it was a problem up front on the offensive line. And of course, DJ got hurt at quarterback, but the running back room last year took a lot of hits. And that's unfortunate, but it's just true. If you're going to win football games and do so consistently, you need your best players on the field. So it's good to know that going into fall camp, Cam Davis is good to go. Rodell's good to go. Jalen's good to go. Like, they had so many guys banged up last year. It was a mash unit, even though they were deep. They needed all of them. Sadly, this year they're deep again. And again, Mekhi Danzy has moved from running back to wide receiver, but it doesn't matter. They're loaded. Chroma coming in, he'll play some. I don't know if he'll be that guy. And then again, they've got 5-6 running backs. I don't know if it's going to be Sam Singleton. I don't know if it's going to be Gavin Sawchuk. I don't know which one it is that's going to take the bull by the horns. David didn't really make any bones about, he wants competition and they all have talent, but he flat out stayed away from naming anybody as a leader in terms of who's going to start before anybody else. I have no idea. But the leader part in terms of who's going to lead the group, I'm going to guess, maybe I'm wrong here, but I'm going to go Rodell Williams. And I know Cam Davis, he's that kind of guy. He said Cam had a really good offseason too. I'm going to guess those guys. We'll see. But there's plenty of experience to go around, and this room has so many different versatile pieces. And by the way, Sam Singleton's another guy that can catch the ball. Like, he's a kickoff guy. He can obviously catch. I'm really curious to see if Florida State uses the running backs to their advantage, especially with 21 or 22 personnel, meaning like they put Singleton in the slot or Lucas in the slot or Cam Davis, who's got great hands too, in the slot, Chroma in the slot. So you play around with the formations and your ability to use personnel packages to get the defense out of sync. They could do that this year. And they could do a lot of motions and different things to put linebackers in flux. That'll lead to some easy scores too. So all of that plays into why I think Florida State's offense will be a bear to deal with. At least, I don't know if the turnovers will do them in on some games. My guess is it will. But this is going to be a fun unit to watch. That's my biggest takeaway from listening to some of the fall camp press conferences, some of the intel I've got, and just knowing some of these players through the recruiting process. Florida State, again, the skill spots in particular, they're underrated, which is like never the case because everybody's always feared Florida State's speed. And then, of course, last year happened. It's like everybody forgot Florida State still gives out scholarships. You know what I mean? Like, why is everybody assuming Florida State's offense will just be whatever? I think they're going to score a bunch of points this year. And I also think they're going to surprise some people with how explosive they are. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think Florida State will be one of the more fun teams in the ACC and the Power Four to watch, especially when they're truly in sync. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But right now, I think Florida State's offense has several NFL players at the skill spots, and I think Florida State fans are going to really, really enjoy it. Last point. If Florida State has more luck with injuries this year, we could see several different guys at receiver and running back be a focal point depending on who they're playing. With this experienced staff and this many different athletes, there's a good chance Florida State's offense will not only be a bear to deal with, it will be versatile enough from one week to the next. We're just a little bit of a different trait that, Jalen Lucas is different than Rodell, obviously. Somebody will get the ball more based on who they're playing because of matchups. That is another reason it will be very difficult, whether you're Alabama, whether you're somebody that's in the ACC schedule, doesn't matter. It will be hard to predict who Florida State's going to get the ball to at the running back position, even if they have a ton of talent, because you're going to be put in matchup situations that are pretty awkward. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Please like and subscribe. We will see you again soon on Locked On Seminoles.